Imagine having your entire future ripped away, all because your own family chose to cover up a crime committed by your twin sister. It left me broken, expelled, and completely alone. But what happens when, years later, those very same people show up on your doorstep with nothing but suitcases and a desperate plea? You might wonder, what the hell happened next? My name is Haley, and let me tell you, I've had a pretty rough and broken childhood. I have two amazing older brothers, Hunter, who's 30, and Harold, 28. Then there's my twin sister, Heidi, but honestly, we're completely estranged now. My brothers are my rock. They're the only family I really talk to. My parents? Dad's 60, Mom's 56. Haven't been in touch with them for ages. For years, I fantasized about the day they'd finally reach out. I picture them apologizing, begging for forgiveness for treating me like garbage and ruining my future. Never, in my wildest dreams, did I imagine that when that day finally came, they'd somehow manage to hurt me even more. Our parents made it crystal clear from the start. They didn't want 4 kids. They planned for 3, mentally structured their lives around just having 3. But then there were 2 of us. Heidi and I were twins, a total surprise. And almost immediately, they made sure everyone knew one of us was an extra. That extra was me. They never said it directly, but every single day of my life, they made me feel it. I was the one who wasn't supposed to be there, but somehow still was. But I have to be honest, my brothers always had my back. Even when we were kids, they were there. I genuinely don't know where I'd be without them. They kept me sane in that toxic house, and they've kept me sane ever since. The favoritism, the discrimination, it started so early. If they bought us things, Heidi always got first pick. I got whatever she didn't want. If Mom cooked based on preferences, it was always Heidi's first. To our parents, we weren't 2 separate people. We were a unit, and that unit was essentially just Heidi. It hurt like hell. By the time I was 7 or 8, my brothers understood. They saw it, and in their own way, they tried to include me, to make me feel seen. To Mom and Dad, I wasn't Haley, I was just not Heidi. And Heidi? Oh, she loved the attention. She lapped up every single drop like a hungry dog. She loved being the center of everything. As we grew, things only got worse. I retreated further into myself. My brothers were the only people I was truly social with at home. They didn't much care for Heidi, because she rarely interacted with them. When she did, it was like she was somehow above us all, like her word was law. That's just not how siblings work. She'd had princess treatment her entire life, and she expected Hunter and Harold to treat her the same. They never did, so she was never close to them. Both of us did well in school, initially. Our grades were similar. But Heidi started to slip in high school. She was involved in tons of extracurriculars, and her social life was booming. Me? My grades didn't slip. On the contrary, I went harder into academics, especially after my brothers left for college out of state. It was tough being home alone with our parents, so I just buried myself in studying and volunteering at a local shelter. The real problem started when we began applying to colleges. Honestly, Heidi's resume was better than mine. She had a better chance of getting into her dream school, even though I had slightly better grades. We both applied to the same university, though. And, surprisingly, we both got in. I hated the idea of going to the same school as her, and I swear, even our parents seemed a little bummed. I think it was because I got in too. They were only rooting for Heidi, and me being just as good, or even getting a scholarship when she didn't, somehow made them bitter. So we both went, but we lived completely different lives. Heidi immediately went full-on party girl. Me? That lifestyle just never appealed. Things went downhill fast. A few months into college, I got this frantic call from Heidi. She said she'd screwed up big time and needed my help. This was like the 2nd or 3rd time we'd even spoken since starting school. I asked her what happened, and she just said she couldn't explain on the phone. I had to meet her. I rushed to her room, and she looked utterly shaken. I genuinely felt scared for her, felt bad. Little did I know, this bee was about to ruin my life. She told me she'd been out partying with friends. Everyone was trashed, blacked out. She was the least drunk, so they decided she should drive. But she was wasted too. She lost control of the car and rammed it into a house wall. Police came, told her to report to the station tomorrow. She was terrified. She didn't want a record. Asked if she'd called mom and dad. She said she had. They were furious, and she didn't want to talk to them. Then she said she needed some air, some food. And I don't know why I didn't notice, but she took my wallet with hers. What happened next was a betrayal I wouldn't have expected from my worst enemies. I stayed with her all night. She came back looking much better after her air and food. I went back to my room, exhausted. The next day, I was summoned by my department head. Urgent. When I walked in, there were cops. My stomach dropped. I thought they were there for Heidi, but they were there for me. They asked why I was drinking and driving last night. They said the university was launching a disciplinary inquiry. I was stunned. I told them they had the wrong girl, that it was my twin. They just looked at me and said the offender registered herself as Haley Porter and showed my ID. I needed to cut the crap. It all clicked into place. Heidi, that little snake. She called me, pretending to be scared and needing support. But she had, in fact, used my ID with the police that night. And when she got back, she'd convinced me to have a drink to calm my nerves, ensuring that if I was tested, I'd come up positive. I begged them to understand. I told them the truth, but they just thought it was too far-fetched. I was let go, devastated. I called Heidi, but she didn't answer. Then Mom and Dad. And you know what they said? They said I needed to understand that Heidi's career would be ruined if I didn't help her, especially since she had loans. Me? I had a scholarship. They actually said I owed this to my sister, that I wouldn't bear the brunt of this more than she would. I couldn't believe it. The way they were behaving, it was surreal. I'd always known they loved her more. But this wasn't just a slap in the face. This was like multiple, open-handed slaps on both cheeks, in full public view. They were willing to let me get punished for a crime she committed because her taking responsibility would ruin her. The same didn't apply to me, apparently. I hung up, shaking, and called Harold. He was furious. He said he'd talk to Mom and Dad, but in the meantime, he told me, no matter what, do not admit to driving drunk. Stick to the truth, he said, don't cave. He'd handle the rest. Unfortunately, none of that mattered. Within the week, I was expelled from college on behavioral grounds. That day, my parents and sister became dead to me. Mom and Dad were expecting me home, but I had nothing left to say to them. I went straight to Hunter's place. I wrote a detailed letter to the university, explaining everything that had really happened. I knew they wouldn't reverse their decision, but I needed a record. For the future. I went completely no contact with my parents. They tried to reach out a few times, but I never responded. My brothers were my absolute rock during this time. From what they told me, and honestly, I don't ask much, they ripped Mom and Dad a new one. They made sure the extended family and some of their friends knew what truly went down. Apparently, Mom and Dad are pretty ostracized from the community because of this little misadventure. Hunter and Harold are low contact with them too. They said Mom and Dad always only wanted to be parents to Heidi, so they were just granting them their wish. I stayed rent-free with Hunter for a couple of months. I picked up a job, but he wouldn't let me contribute to rent or anything. He told me to save every penny for college. I ended up going to a new college the next academic year. In the end, what happened, as awful as it was, actually benefited me. I was finally able to study what I really wanted. And even though I had to take out some loans, I knew there was no Heidi there. I could live life on my own terms. So, while I have a year-long, unexplained expulsion on my CV, I ended up studying what I love and found a job I love. I graduated 2 years ago, landed a good job straight out of college halfway across the country. It was weird moving so far, but honestly, my life is good now. Heidi and my parents try to get in touch once in a while. I just don't respond. I've moved forward. I don't need them in my life anymore. They're the ones who are guilty, they're the ones to blame, desperately trying to make amends. Hunter and Harold are low contact too, and they keep me updated if I ask, but there's no real family talk among us three. And they never divulge any information about me to our parents. They know better than that. That's the one thing I asked for. They don't get to know what I do, where I am, or how I'm doing. And my brothers have respected that for years. Then, a few days ago, my parents were at my doorstep, ringing the bell, at 5 in the morning. It took me a full 2 days to realize it was actually them. But the sheer audacity, the way they just welcomed themselves, left no doubt. I wasn't dreaming. They immediately launched into the sob story. It's been so long. We missed you so much. We cried every night. So they just decided to come and see me. I was still reeling, but I asked them, "Who gave you my address?" They said Hunter did. I immediately called Hunter, ready to rip into him. He swore on his life he didn't. I just slammed the phone down in their faces. Normally, I'm a good host, but I absolutely did not want these guests around. I told them to sort it out with Hunter, tell me the truth, or I was throwing them out onto the street. And I meant it. But I still wanted to know who had spilled my location. They tried to gaslight both Hunter and me, but deep down, I knew my brother would never betray my trust like that. This went on for a while. I finally told them if they didn't come clean in the next 15 minutes, I was kicking them out, regardless. The thing is, they had come with suitcases. Many suitcases. It looked like they were planning to live here. I have no idea who or what gave them that idea. All I knew was they were not welcome in my house. Not by a long shot. They could go wherever they wanted, but they weren't staying here. They tried stalling again, laughing it off. So when the 15 minutes were up, I started picking up their suitcases one by one and putting them outside. That's when they finally realized I was serious. And I wouldn't back down until they told me the truth. They finally admitted it. They got my address from social media. They'd been using fake Facebook accounts, virtually stalking my profiles for months. That's how they found out where I lived. Honestly, I still don't know how you can get an exact address just from stalking a few social media accounts, but I was too tired for that crap, especially since all this was happening on a Saturday. I told them I was going back to sleep for a couple of hours. They were welcome to sleep until then. But after that, they needed to get out of my house and never show their faces again. I told them they could use the time I was sleeping to find alternate accommodation or book a ticket to whatever godforsaken hole they wanted to go to, but my hospitality to them wasn't extending beyond that. They tried to butt in to get a few more words in, but I just went upstairs and locked my room. I hoped they wouldn't steal anything, but if they did, they did. I just wanted to sleep. When I woke up, they'd made themselves comfortable. They had unpacked. My living room was a total disaster. But since I felt a bit better after sleeping, I didn't lose my temper as quickly as I had that morning. I calmly asked them, "What made you think you could actually stay here?" At first, they tried beating around the bush. "We missed you. It's time to bury the past, move forward as a family." I wasn't buying any of it. I pushed a little more, and my mother finally broke down. And when I say broke down, I mean she literally crumpled, sobbing like a hurt child, wailing. It was weird to watch, honestly. She tried to say something, but not even 1% of it was coherent. So I turned to my dad. "What's going on?" And he revealed the truth. He said they'd been kicked out of their house. They had nowhere to go. My jaw practically hit the floor. I looked at him in disbelief. "How the hell do you get kicked out of your own house?" He said a few years ago, after college, Heidi started getting into a lot of crap. Involved with the wrong people, screwed up her academics. She was expelled from her new college, too. But then she promised to turn over a new leaf. She got into another college, but without scholarships and, get this, her criminal record. He mumbled that part and I almost spat out my water, stood in the way of her getting loans. Long story short, Mom and Dad rented one floor of their house to a couple. Sketchy people, according to them, but they trusted them because Heidi had brought them in. She knew them. Now, those sketchy people had taken possession of the whole house. They smoked pot on the first floor all day. The stench was unbearable. Loud parties all the time. Whenever Mom and Dad tried to complain, Heidi intervened, saying they couldn't treat her friends that way. Basically, the house had become unlivable for my parents. 3 months ago, Mom had a health scare because of all the pot smoke. That's when they decided to leave for a while, leaving Heidi to take care of the mess. Rookie mistake. They told me they'd given her a stern talking to, hoping she'd realize what she'd done and step up. But that little viper screwed them over big time. When they went back last week, the locks had been changed. That pot couple was now on the ground floor. Heidi wasn't picking up their calls. And when they said they'd call the police, they got the shock of their lives. Heidi, behind their backs, had sold the entire house to her friends. She must have forged signatures and documents, but the house was now legally in her friends' possession. My parents said they could do nothing. I looked at them, incandescent with rage. Of course you can do something, I yelled. You can file a report against Heidi and those guys. Forgery is a huge deal. If Heidi forged those documents, she'd be in for a long, long time. They looked incredibly uncomfortable. They said they knew Heidi would have to serve jail time if they went forward with the complaint, which is why they decided to get her into therapy instead. In the meantime, they figured they would just stay with me. It took me a couple of minutes to process their sheer audacity. I just stared at them, like a deer in headlights. They came to me, instead of holding Heidi accountable, knowing full well she had committed a crime. Had they forgotten what they did to me all those years ago, forcing me to take the blame for their criminal daughter? They didn't say anything at first. But when I started accusing them more directly, they tried to pivot. You need to show some compassion, Haley, my mother pleaded. Your sister has always been a troubled child. As parents, it's our duty to stand by her when she strays, not throw her to the dogs. My voice was shaking, but it was firm. You didn't stand by me when I hadn't strayed at all, I retorted. And it's clear from the way you talk that you're only interested in being parents to Heidi, not to me. So since you don't see me as family, I have no problem throwing you to the dogs. I told them, in no uncertain terms, that they were not welcome here. They were homeless by choice, not because they were in distress. They had allowed this to happen, and even now, they were letting her get away with something this big.
This was completely on them.
I told them to get out before I called the cops. They tried to push, to emotionally blackmail me again, but I told them none of that was going to work. I think they finally understood. I wasn't breaking. There was no pity left in me for them. They made a lot of faces, but ultimately they left. Even at the very end, they kept trying, telling me I needed to reconsider, that they wouldn't have anywhere to go. But I just said, that's on you. It's not my problem. You have other children to beg in front of. But you are dead to me, and I will not be helping you out, no matter what situation you're in. They looked utterly defeated. And finally, they left. But my head has been pounding ever since. That was 3 days ago, and I don't know where they've gone. They haven't tried contacting me, and I'm glad, but I can't help but wonder. Update 1. I know it hasn't been long, but I have an update for all of you.
Hunter called me yesterday.
Mom and Dad showed up at his place, unannounced. I had informed both him and Harold when they came to me, and I was honestly expecting them to go to Hunter's next. Harold lives too far, so he's safe. Hunter told me they immediately launched into their sob story, villainizing me, saying I kicked them out. And they even said they knew favoring Heidi was the right thing to do, because I had grown up to be a B-word anyway. Hunter mumbled that Heidi was a bigger B-word because she stole their home, but they kept defending her.
Hunter was exhausted.
Hunter lives with his girlfriend, Clea, and she was furious about them just randomly dropping by with baggage. Clea is a no-nonsense person. She doesn't have the bandwidth for anyone's bullcrap, and she doesn't mince words. She straight up asked them how long they planned to stay. They kept giving vague answers like a while, then a couple of days. She just lost it. She demanded an actual date, so she could plan accordingly. That's when they admitted they didn't have a date in mind. They had nowhere else to go. They were waiting for Heidi to come to her senses so they could move back into their house. That confession? That was what Clea was waiting for. She said she'd let them stay for as long as they wanted, as long as it took for the issue to be resolved. Before she could finish, Mom and Dad started rejoicing, thinking they'd won. But the main part came next.
There's a caveat, Clea said.
My mother piped in, "Oh, we won't disturb your privacy. We'll clean up after ourselves." She even tried to paint a picture of the perfect guest, saying she had no issues with late-night parties, a clear jab at the people in their old house.
Clea just laughed.
That's not what I'm talking about. She looked them dead in the eye and said she would let them stay only if they pressed charges against Heidi and took active steps to regain possession of their house. Hunter told me it looked like someone had stabbed them with a dagger. They said she was being cruel, that they couldn't do it. But Clea was absolutely adamant. This was the only way they could stay. They had a choice to make. She was offering them a roof, but they had to do the right thing in return. If they still chose to protect Heidi, that was on them. And they couldn't turn around and blame their kids for it. And to nobody's surprise, they said they'd rather be homeless than turn on their child. Clea congratulated them, and then she kicked them out. She's a total force of nature, honestly. I love her. Hunter says he has no idea where they are now, and they might try to come back to me again, but I told him not to worry. I'd kick them out just as fast. Update 2. They finally had to press charges against Heidi and her friends. There were a lot of complaints by the Homeowners Association, and they took matters into their own hands. I don't know all the details of what's happening, but I know for a fact Heidi is completely screwed. Mom and Dad aren't talking to Hunter or Harold either. We're just ecstatic to be rid of them at this point. Heidi actually tried getting in touch with Hunter, asking him to knock some sense into Mom and Dad, but he hasn't responded. That's the last we've heard from any of them, and I truly hope it stays that way. They're so weirdly enmeshed with each other, and if they can't pull their heads out of their asses, that's on them. I have worked incredibly hard to build this life, literally from scratch, and I will not allow them to come and crap all over it. What would you have done in my shoes? Have you ever faced such a betrayal from your own family? Tell me what you think. I really want to know.